Welcome to the Movement and Performance Podcast. My mission is to help people get stronger and healthier through the power of movement, especially here in New York City. In this episode, I'm joined by longtime friend and training partner, Ryan Berenger. Ryan has been training his entire life and brings a practitioner's perspective built through years of experience in the weight room. Over time, we've had many conversations about his old school training style, the methods that shaped his early years, alongside modern science and the insights I've gained through research and academic study. We discuss what still holds up today, what may be outdated, and what modern knowledge has added to the conversation. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Old school iron versus modern science, and that's something we've constantly I think when we go down in the locker room and we're debating, or not even debating, sharing information, I think you've grown over the years also, and we'll talk about what are some of those things, but you've grown over the years. I bring some of my new approaches, but I think about it, and I use three words when I'm talking about curriculum planning for a phys ed teacher. I say the classics, the antiques, and contemporary. And I think it's the same thing when you're planning anything in life. The antiques are the old things that we can put on a shelf. We can look at them in a museum.
Yes.
The classics are the things that are old but still good, and contemporary is new. So when we're down there, it's that beautiful blend of what should be an antique, what is a classic, because there's definitely good things we want to keep doing, and then maybe what are some of these new things, and that's kind of what this episode is about.
Great. I mean, thanks again for having me. I'm very excited, and I love what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I think it's great for everybody. No matter what you're interested, the message and all the things that you really try to convey is just about movement and just general health for everybody, right? So I'm glad I'm able to contribute in any way that I can.
So let's dive right into it.
Yep.
So I guess the first thing is thinking a little bit about what are some old school practices that you think, if we're talking about the antiques and the classics, some things that are a little bit old school that maybe we might not want to do it that way anymore, and then the things that are like the classics we should keep. Are there any things that come to mind of like old school training versus modern training today?
Yeah, I definitely think about how I grew up. Grew up a lot on, the Joe Weider principles, and I think a lot of those things stood the test of time. So when I think about, old school techniques, it was really about, that maximum intensity, grind your muscles until you can't lift anymore,
right.
The failure
Right.
of every set. I think back to, we'll get to Arnold later, but in Pump and Iron, where you talked about the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th set that really makes the muscle grow.
Right.
So a lot of those high intensity workouts, I remember I used to go to the gym and I'd be training weights for 2 hours,
Right.
just high intensity, kicking butt, right? And just totally, exhausting the muscles that you were training that day. So, but I think a lot of those exercises really stood the test of time. I think when we start to think about what are some of those things on the shelf, I think a lot about how people trained that it probably wasn't the smartest, and really wore bodies down in a sense that, you saw people that were getting injured, and not through longevity, but in short periods of time, and then they were basically destroying their bodies. But I think about the oldies but goodies. There's definitely quite a few that come to mind.
Yeah, so, when we're talking about the classics and we're talking about the antiques. One of the classics, or I don't know what category we'll put it in, but one thing you just started talking about was training to failure.
Yes.
And that's a big talk for today.
Yes.
And they talk about training to failure, and the other word that is a buzzword is minimum effective dose. So do you need to actually go to failure every time, or do you not? And with modern science, so I'll be the modern science guy here, right? But the modern science has now pointed to reps in reserve. So meaning you don't need to always go to complete failure. However, you definitely need to get close to failure and frequently, because otherwise the body doesn't have a stimulus to change.
Correct.
So yes, we need to go close to failure is what they've discovered. And I don't remember the exact numbers. And nowadays I hate giving exact numbers because there's always going to be a study that can show a number that's slightly different. But whatever it was, let's say 2 reps in reserve, 3 reps in reserve. So meaning by the time I got to that end, I could have done 3 more, but not more than 3, right? So
Yep,
I was
yep.
close to that failure, but not exactly over that burnout.
Yes.
And so when you compare those two, I think we've learned that failure is good and close to failure is good. However, there is this idea of minimum effective dose where there is a point, I think they say it's not linear. So meaning more is good, more is good, more is good, more is good. Ooh, more is not as good. Oh, more is actually bad. There's a point when there does hit an overload point.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Do you think you've seen that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I think about how I used to train, and it was, you went to this place, right? And this place was, you were just going to make your body go beyond its capabilities. And I know personally, I probably did that too much.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like every single workout, there was nothing in reserve.
Yeah.
Right? It's like if I didn't take my body past the place it wanted to go,
Right.
I didn't view it as a great workout.
Right.
So that was the place that I would go in all the time and just say, okay, I did 9 last week, I got to do 10 this week, or I have to do 12 this week, right? Or just constantly pushing yourself. And I think that's where progression is. But at the same time, to your point, it's how you can't continually do that to your body without starting to lean back a little bit and leave that little bit of reserve, and do that maybe once a month, right? Or once every 2 months, where you're really gonna take it to that place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've seen that more and more. And personally, as you get older and your joints really can't take that pounding anymore, you almost naturally have to do that, right? So although your mind is still pushing, the other piece is kind of saying, okay, you know what? I want a little more in the tank. I want to continue to do this, for a long period of time.
Yeah. And then I guess I'll pick at some little specific ones because I know they're like popular buzzwords, and it'll be interesting to see the old school mindset and the modern science. So although I don't think you're old school mindset, by the way, but the old school mindset.
Yes.
And I think you've grown.
Yes.
But so you'll be able to give the insight in both directions.
Yeah.
But a couple other big ones, I don't know. Let me actually ask you first before I start to rant.
Go ahead.
When it comes to muscle building,
Yes.
were there any things that people used to say, oh, you have to do this, or training this way is going to help you get that? Or were there any big gems back in the day? So training to failure is one. Anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah. So I personally was, and I'm still kind of lean. That's my natural. My DNA, what's in my DNA and my genetics, but I was a hard gainer. So a lot of the things that I really focus on is how do I pack on that muscle and size. And one of the things that I did was I trained with powerlifters. So I trained with guys that were really using tremendous amounts of weight, and I learned a lot from that on how to pack on that muscle. So what I really focus on, and I still think this is key today, and these are one of the goodies, right, was the compound movements, right? The bench pressing, you get under that bench bar, right, and making sure you're pumping out that chest, right, the shoulders, the lats, and how you're hitting all these muscles, to really pack on that overall size. The squats, the deadlifts, right, I call the three granddaddies of them all, right, is the bench, the squat, the deadlift, and I would do those every workout, and constantly pound those on. And then another, one of Joe Weider's principles was, cheat reps. So if I wanted to do barbell curls, right, I'd go to do strict for a couple of sets. Last couple what you call cheat curls, right, where you're really putting on that extra weight that beyond your muscles could handle, right, and maybe you're using a little bit of upper back, right, or you're getting a little bit of that rocking motion or whatever, right. So taking that to the next level where you're just putting on this insane amount of weight that probably your body wasn't ready to handle at that time, but breaking through a barrier, right? So those are some of the things that I think about when I was a hard gainer.
Yeah.
To really try to break through that.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff with that. There's two approaches that I'll take. I actually did an episode with one gentleman on advanced bodybuilding principles.
Yes.
Dr. Guillermo was his name. And they say for a beginner, of course, there's going to be, this is why we're going to go two directions here, but beginners are a little different than advanced, right?
Absolutely.
But they say beginners, you can almost do anything, and your body's going to kind of grow from that because it's more, literally anything is more than what you did yesterday.
Correct.
And if you're doing more than what you did yesterday,
Correct.
your body's going to change to some degree.
100%.
So you can almost get away with doing anything. And, there's really no special, whether you use the advanced bodybuilding principles or whether you use just a basic, like 3 sets of 10 kind of thing, it didn't matter actually much for muscle growth. So what they found, though, is that when you're advanced, they don't get to train those populations as much because oftentimes the people that sign up for these studies are college students and they're more like untrained. You don't have like advanced bodybuilders sometimes always signing up for these studies, or it's a little harder to do. But when it came to things like, for example, motivation, right? So like, if I just do 3 sets of 10 all the time, eventually that's monotonous. It gets a little bit boring. Sometimes it's the thing that just gets you excited to spice it up. Even if you were like, it's something I've never done before, your body's going to notice that it's something new, so it's a different change. And it provides that excitement. And even if it was like partially true or partially not, I'm sure there's still more research to be done. Like, was it actually more effective? Just the fact that it got you more excited to train harder made it more effective, because of the motivational factor.
I agree 100%, and I think, we didn't get to my, Arnold Schwarzenegger and the impact that he had on my life, but going into some of these theories, and once we get into that piece, it's exactly that, right? So it's more about confusing the body.
Right.
So, and that's kind of the advanced, right? So now, like through my journey, the beginning was, like you said, the 3 sets of 10, doing the compound movements, putting on size. But as I wanted to continue to grow, right, and continue to get past those barriers, you had to go into some of those advanced techniques. And that one is really more about shocking the body, right? There's a whole bunch of terms for it. That was a big principle of Arnold's, right? And you'll even see to this day, I know he's close to 80 years old, but he's out there and he'll tell people, the body knows what to expect after a while, right? So if you're going in the gym and you're doing those 3 sets of 10, and first you're doing bench press, and then you're doing your flies, then you're doing your cable flies, your dips. Over a period of time, the body, while you'll maintain and you'll probably build some density, you're not going to get maximum benefit because the body already knows what's coming. So it's really about shocking that body. Throw something different. And that could be reps, different amount of reps, different amount of sets, different amount of exercises, something different, exactly what you're saying. So the body responds to that, right? It elicits a response in the muscles where you'll get that jump start in the next level. So I always tell people, like, once you reach that plateau, after about 3-4 months of doing a routine, you should change it up, right? And then when you get really advanced, your routine should change from one to the next, right? Maybe one week you're doing barbell bench press. The next week you want to do alternate arm dumbbell presses, right? Something different that the body responds to.
Yeah, there's interesting stuff with that too. From my knowledge on it so far, we were talking earlier about periodization and kind of like thinking about your programming throughout a year type of thing. What I usually tell people about, and this number, again, I don't like to give exact numbers nowadays, but you also need to give an exact number so people have an idea of like, otherwise I'm just shooting in the dark. But like maybe let's say every 6 weeks or so, or you said every 3 months, that's still a good number too, that you're changing up this routine. Your body does need that, it needs a new stimulus. It gets used to it. They also found, though, that if you do change it too rapidly, right? So like, for example, if I do one workout today, I do a completely different workout tomorrow, and I constantly do that daily, it can almost be too confusing that the body now doesn't get an opportunity to recognize this thing and change to it. Because it's like, oh, this isn't going to make sense, but it kind of will. I don't know, let's say I was doing something that involved my calf. Now it's like, oh, my calf just started to adapt, but now I just shifted it to the bicep thing, and now all of a sudden the focus and the emphasis is here, and the body's almost like, wait, what do you want me to be fit for? So there is still also this point of like, and you mentioned it a little before, of having the basics too. So it's like you need to be somewhat consistent enough that your body recognizes this is what I want you to be good at. But it also needs to be different enough so that you have a stimulus for change.
Yes.
So it's a fine art of push and pull and when I used to go to, I went one time when I was young. Alex from the dojo moved to Thailand. So
Yep.
I went to Thailand and you did some Muay Thai training there and stuff. But a lot of the people would say same, but different when you're like go shopping.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, is that real or is that not? Oh, that looks like something. Like, oh, same, but different. But that's kind of like what training is. It's like same, but different. Like, okay, I'm doing barbell bench press, then I'm doing dumbbell bench press, then I'm doing flies. Then it's like same things, but slightly different.
Yep.
And that's kind of the art of it all is like same, but different. Because, I want it to be clear to my body. For example, let's say I want my bicep to grow. I want it to be clear that I want my bicep to grow. I don't want it to be so confused, like, if that's making any sense there.
Yes, no, absolutely.
So yeah, it's finding that fine balance. But yeah, the other big thing you said, and I did want to touch on, the exercise selection. Sometimes people do overcomplicate it, and there really is like a core foundation. And while you will same, but different, what are some of those core exercises that come to mind to you? I know you said them already, but to have a
so I always start with the big three. The barbell bench press, the deadlift, and the back squat. The barbell back squat. To me, I would recommend those to any beginner, in the sense that it hits the most muscle groups, right? It stimulates growth in the body.
Yeah.
And those are the things that you really want to basically tell your body, we're transforming you, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen that. When we talk a lot about genetics, and genetics always plays a part, but you can actually retrain your body, right? In terms of the demands you're going to put on it. So, I always look at and here's one of my, I guess we call classics, is when I do body parts or I do workouts, I generally approach compound movements, do them first, because those are also the ones that take the most energy from you, right? And can tax your body the most. So you obviously want to put those in the front. Those are the first things you do. So if I did a chest workout, I would, I do a warm up, but I'd start with bench press, right? And I'd apply another, Weider principle of pyramiding, right? Pyramiding is light, high reps, and as you progressively increase reps, you increase weight, you decrease reps, right? So as you add weight, you do that for less reps, right? And then you actually come down towards the back end, right? So I'd start light, high reps. Next add some weight, 12 reps. Add some weight, 8 reps, right? And then towards the back end, you start to go backwards again. So now I go back down and go light. That's a pyramiding principle. Do that with a compound movement. Then you go a little bit more to isolation. And the isolations are the ones that really target the individual muscle that you're trying to work, right? What are some of those things? With chest, it's so great because, there's a lot of assist muscles in there. No matter what, you got your front delts, you got your lats, your core always, right, to some extent. But you start looking at your fly movements. Isolation movements are meant to do somewhat lighter, right? You're not going to pack on the weights that you do with the compound movements. So I like to always vary those two things. The compound movement, get that growth, stimulate that growth, and then really start to target, those muscles that I'm really trying to hit.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot to...
No, that's all good. That's all good stuff. So as we go through, I'll throw some of that modern science stuff in there too.
Sure.
I think gentleman Mike Boyle does a pretty good job with this. I got this from him years ago. I think it's a classic of his. Although if you go further back to like the Arnold era. There's different levels of classics here, right? But although Mike Boyle's been around for a very long time, but he would divide it by the movement. So he would say vertical push, vertical pull. I'm sorry, I did horizontal, but the motions I was displaying. Vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull, hip dominant, knee dominant. And then you could dabble in other things if you want to say core, anti-rotational, blah, 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 other things. But it still fits kind of in that umbrella. The only thing to think about there, because he'd say, for every push, you should also kind of be doing a pull to some degree.
Yep.
So old school, I remember, because when I first started bodybuilding, I was doing some old school bodybuilding stuff. I learned from a lot of guys like you or like my father's friend Billy Rogan, Billy Rogan, all those, these all old school bodybuilding. Going to Dolphin on, under the L over there.
Dolphin Fitness.
Dolphin Fitness, like all these guys were like, it was the bodybuilding era. But everybody would do bench press, but they wouldn't do enough rows, meaning like no bent over row or no pull up. And, that Mike Boyle would say like, oh, that's something that needs to be addressed. And probably why it was linked to many potential shoulder injuries or that stuff that he would see in practice as a strength coach. So, so I love that idea of push and pull. And I like how he separated vertical and horizontal. Because, then you have so then for him, I mean, his exercises might be slightly different, but generally speaking, it's a press, a lat pull down of some sort, a bench press of some sort, a row of some sort, a squat of some sort, and a deadlift of some sort, which still kind of falls into, I think, what you would say is a bread and butter.
Yeah. And that's, I didn't hear that way of standardizing it, but it makes a lot of sense. I like how he talked about using planes, right? Certain planes to achieve some of those things to create the functional balance.
Yeah.
Where I would approach it in other ways, using those compound movements, you're hitting so many muscles, and that's why those movements were great. You're doing a deadlift, you're hitting your legs, but guess what? You're hitting your lats, your trapezius, learning about hip flexion, right? And how to get the hips and driving with your hips, right? All those movements, great functional exercises.
Yeah. I'll give you another one. This will probably be an interesting one, and I don't know if we chatted about this one in the basement yet or not, but it's also important to consider what your goal is.
Right.
If your goal is muscle building or is your goal muscle strength, is your goal, right? Most of these conversations revolve around building mass and muscle because most people in general population care about aesthetics. So when they're saying like what's better and what's not, they're usually kind of doing it through that lens.
Yes.
But so the debate was around, and it's funny, this might hit a button for you, but barbell bench press versus the dumbbell bench press. And the dumbbell bench press being superior for muscle growth and for the reason of stretch. And I'll explain.
Yep.
So one of the newest things in the research world is, lengthening partials. But what they're talking about is kind of like loading the muscle in the stretched position is more important than in the not so stretched position. So for example, when I'm doing a bench press, the going low and really, really, really stretching the chest and loading it while it's in this stretched position and coming up versus just doing like a half at the top. They found it to be a bit more superior. And so what happened was, not that the barbell is worse or better, but they found that they were able to get a deeper stretch because the barbell hits your chest and you can't get lower at a certain point. Where with the dumbbells, you could actually go even a little lower. And, so there was like a study done with that, and it showed like that there's potential that the dumbbell bench press was better for the muscle growth because it had more of a stretch. But it's just an interesting thing to consider, the idea of really getting that full range of motion and getting a deep stretch and how it can help with muscle growth.
I mean, I agree. I mean, you're talking about the eccentric versus concentric.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, again, a lot of it is just people not truly understanding the full exercise, you know, and then, you know, sometimes you have, when you were young, as we all were, who can bench the most, who can lift the most weights, but you're leaving out some key principles, right? So, you know, and I've done both.
Yeah.
You know, I think dumbbells are fantastic, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes, you know, you feel like I'll feel the muscle more on a dumbbell a little bit than I will on a bench press, I mean, on a barbell. But I think a lot of it also is people not really focusing on the eccentric piece.
Yeah.
You know, when you get on that bench, the number one thing is you want to get that weight up off your chest, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you'll see bouncing, you'll see a lot of dropping, and then, right? But you know, even now as I've gotten older and I know like my joints can't take the same amount of load that
Right.
it used to, you know, bringing that weight down slow,
Right.
right? Or even messing with the width of the grip. So if you want to really get that little extra stretch, you can kind of widen your grip a little bit. The dumbbells are excellent though, because the dumbbells, because you have independent hands, right, one side versus the other, you can play around with a lot of variations. Some things I like to do is one arm at a time, right? Concentric, I have my right side completely flexed while I'm focusing on the eccentric movement and and the stretching, right? And then bringing that up and then, you know, doing the same thing on the other side, right? So, you know, I agree. I think they both have their place, and those are some of the things like I talk about with changing and shocking your body. Maybe you're doing that barbell, switch it up. Now maybe you can do dumbbell either your next workout or stick with dumbbell for the next 2 months, right? And just try to see what that does. I do love the fly. I think the fly does a lot of what you're talking about, that real stretched out motion. And, you know, I remember coming up as I always used to tell people, bench press is the granddaddy, but if you want to really focus on chest development as an isolation, nothing's better than a fly.
Yeah.
You know, just because you get that real good stretch. I will say though, you have to be careful with the weight, because those are also exercises that you can get injuries from. Because if you overload in that, it's also the most vulnerable positions when it's stretched. But I think when used right, I would agree with you. I think it's one of the best things that you can do to really optimize your development.
Nice. I'm trying to think if there are any other big ones. I know it's like time under tension, length and partials, minimum effective dose. Like those are the big buzzes nowadays. I know I did a little bit of work at, so the number one researcher, if you Google, you know, hypertrophy researcher, best in the world, I mean, there'll probably be a couple different people that come up, but definitely Brad Schoenfeld is like the guy. And, he works at a Lehman College. He has a lab there. I got to work in that lab,
Nice.
and which was really cool. So I did work with some of the guys there. Some of them tune in. I had one of them on with for an episode too. Some of them are going to watch this probably and say, "Oh, he forgot this. I can't believe he forgot that," or whatever it is. But so I mean, there's always new things on the rise nowadays. Oh, actually, there is one more, and I didn't want to forget this one. And I'll just mention it because you said it before, but just to give the little gem to people. One of the newest things in research is about how many reps you do, and the fact that it matters less about how many, and it matters more about the getting close to failure. So for example, they found in research that whether you do 5 repetitions or whether you do 25 repetitions, both of them will stimulate muscle growth if you're training close to failure. Because they used to say that high reps are like, you know, if you want toned muscle,
the cutting, right? And
if you want toned muscle, you'll do that, and if you want bulky muscle, you'll do. And like pretty much muscle growth is just muscle growth. I mean, if you're looking more toned, it's because you have lower body fat. You know, maybe it's genetic things and stuff like that too. But muscle growth is just muscle growth, and what they've found is that whether it is 5 reps or 25, as long as you come close to failure, there is a cap. I think the cap was 30% of your 1 rep max. So like if you're doing like too light, then it could be a problem. But generally speaking, you can, you know, 25 reps, you're still lifting a significant weight. It's not like you're lifting like a 2-pound dumbbell, you know? So you still need mechanical tension there, you know? It can't just be so light that it's not. But the lower reps and the higher reps, around that 25 rep range, was also shown to be able to stimulate muscle growth, which is interesting.
That is very interesting.
So as we, we'll slowly drift into different categories, but just to kind of wrap this area up,
Sure.
is there anything that you do differently today when it comes to your, strength training and your fitness that is different from what you did 20 years ago?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I'm 54 years old, so at 54, you're not.
You don't look like it.
Thank you, right? But you can't train at 54 the way you do at 24. Right. Mentally, you do, right? Like mentally, every time I go to the gym, I want to get better. I don't think you can ever stop getting better, but your body changes, right? So, now I'm forced sometimes to certain things I have to be a little bit more aware of. For instance, like I'll tell people, my muscles are as strong as they ever were. I truly believe that. But some of my joints will prevent me from my muscles really getting overloaded. And if I do, I'll pay for it, right? Because then I know, my shoulder's hurting for weeks, and then I have to kind of dial down, right? So I think I'm a little bit more self-aware, where probably the thing I did most was I would work out through injuries. I would
20 years ago.
When I was in my 20s, I'd work out if I was sick.
Right.
And I think probably the thing that I focused on the most is one of the big three that I say is most important to overall fitness and health is sleep. I'm much more purposeful with my sleep and making sure that I'm getting my 8 hours, right, of sleep a day. That's critical for recovery. It's critical for growth. So to me, when you're younger, you have that higher energy level. You can get by on 6 hours. I need my sleep now. If I want to maximize my workouts, so it's probably not the answer that you would expect out of me, right? But I would say be more aware of the weight, right? And be super, super, super focused on form, right? And then my sleep. So it's really all around the recovery and injury prevention is probably where my mind goes the most in terms of what's changed now.
Yeah. No, that is the answer I would actually want to hear from you, or I'd hope, because, I think coming from somebody who was this, go hard, go home, and still is, but how you can still be that, but be wise. So I was almost hoping you'd say that, because it's an example that more men or more masculine energy, however you identify, whatever. But if you're feeling very masculine, I think that's better, a better energy to kind of a better role model of energy to follow. That you could still be very masculine, you could still be very dominant, you could still be super strong and go hard, but you can also be wise, where you're not. I use this always. People probably heard me say this a bunch of times. You need a gas and a brake in life. If you only have a brake, you don't go anywhere. And if you only have a gas, you'll run yourself into a wall. And I think some men run themselves to a wall.
Yeah. And I did that. Early I ran myself through a wall. Yeah. Right. And I think that's exactly that. Right. It's now in my mind. It's like, I want to keep doing this. I want to do this until I'm 80, 90 years old. As long as I can get up, I want to be in the gym. I want to lift. I want to do all these things. But I have to think about preserving my body, right? And so there's a balance between preservation of your body, but not losing that intensity. Because let's face it, that's something that takes you through life. Being able to battle you talked about Iron Ryan and all that. It became a mindset for me, right? It's like, you got to battle through that. And for you to continue to do that, you have to be a little bit smarter. If something's hurting you, okay, maybe you don't do that exercise that's going to aggravate that, right? And just do something else. Doesn't mean that you have to necessarily come off the gas all the way, but it's diverting away from aggravating that one injury, it's so efficiency. You can keep on going. Yeah,
it's efficiency, because if you break down the wall, there's a point when it's not sustainable.
Correct.
Right? Because if I want to sustain this for the week, if I killed myself on Monday, I didn't make it to Sunday.
Correct. Right. And what's worse, right? Attacking that weight and then being on the shelf for, now you're on the shelf for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, right? With an injury, as opposed to, you know what, if I lay off a little bit, I can still work out next week,
Yeah.
right? Or 2 days from now.
And it's a fine line, and I get it, because there's a point when, like, then it's like someone says, "Are you starting to get soft?" Right? So now it's like, am I getting too soft? Am I giving too much break? Am I right?
course.
It's this fine line,
Of
and
course.
I get it. But there's no doubt that you need to play that line. You cannot just go hard, go home all the time. It is not sustainable. It will get you hurt. It will get you. That's why I think most men, they say, I think there's an older age, more men die from like heart attack than women or something like that. It's like you're just like always on, like everything's like,
Yes. And
holding
probably
on to stress.
Yeah, I mean, another piece is meditation and learning how to truly relax. That was probably the one thing that I always had problems with.
Right.
And people used to, you're so tightly wound. Like I was always in that go mentality, right? It's like everything that I did with that intensity, right? I always had that intensity. But I learned to learn to relax. You have to have those things, whether it's reading a book, whether it's meditating, whatever it is. It could still even be an activity, but it could be an activity that brings you peace, right? And going there and learning how to unwind, shut off, disconnect, whatever you want to call it, right? I think that's critical times for you.
Yeah.
So when you turn that back on, it's there, but it's not causing that damage to your body.
Yeah.
The stress that you put, and that's another piece. I mean, you're putting stress on your body. The idea of fitness is to stress your body, right? But it recovers. Like I tell my boys, your muscle grows when it's at rest. You're working out and you're tearing it up, but it's the healing that makes the muscle grow, right? You're healing and it's growing and it's healing back stronger. But for it to heal, you have to rest. You have to be able to back off of that a little bit.
And now, just to hit the opposite side of that too, though.
Yep.
So while, now we do know that we do have to rest, you still also, though, have to push yourself.
Of course.
So now what about that, right? So, because let me tell you something. We do planks in the dojo, right? We're doing it like towards the end of our warm up. I mean, you're holding this thing like as if you're completely relaxed for 3 minutes. Like everybody's dropping on the floor. You could go for like all day. You still have this grit, and you're able to still push yourself and bring some intensity every now and then too. Yeah. Do you think that that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the beast is in there.
Right.
Right. It's always there.
Right.
You think about like these boxers, Tyson and everything, and he talks about the fear of unleashing the beast. Right. Like when you were at that point in your life, it never goes away. It lies dormant. Right. So, I know I think now I don't walk around with the beast all the time. It's in there, but I call upon it when I need it, right? So, when I'm doing planks in class and I'm challenging the class, I'm also challenging myself, right? So I have to prove to myself that it's there and I can turn it on, right? When I want to, right? And so you have to do that. You always have to continue to go to that place, whether it's unleashing the beast, right, or going to that place. Yeah, you have to visit familiar places once in a while. Yeah,
I think the ultimate goal is almost like a genie in the bottle, or if you think putting a cap on it, like if you put this thing in your, so meaning like I can take off the cap at will and pour this thing out, or I can put the cap on and keep it shut. I think the difference as we age is not that you no longer have that ability to be the beast, right? You still have it, but now you have control over the beast.
Correct.
And you have the cap, and you know when to put them away and keep them in the closet, and you know when to let them out. And I think there's the control aspect.
And we talk about martial arts. I think I learned that really taught me to control the beast, the martial arts, right? And we've sparred many times.
Yeah.
My
face remembers your knuckles.
Your dad and I had the legendary fights and everything, and you're sparring and you're in that beast mode, right? Yeah. You're not feeling pain. You're not feeling, But then afterwards, when you come down off of that and you get out of that place, you almost become like a normal human again, right? You
the
know,
Hulk.
and you're able to kind of unwind and reflect and do all those things. But going to those places, right? That's where the growth lies. Like that's the special place about it, right? Is when you go to those places and you're like, wow, you know what? I walk those roads, and I can still walk those roads when I want to, right? And those are some things that some people never get to, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the achievement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I know the time flies on
Yeah.
this. But yeah, as we start to close this out, are there any big things that maybe you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
Yeah, so things that are really passion of mine is really focusing on what is wellness and, fitness. And again, my nutritionist would always tell me when I first came in is exercise is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Exercise, and it falls right into your warehouse of movement, right? Exercise, number one, but, very close follows are nutrition and sleep.
Yeah.
You have to do those three things. If one of them suffers, it affects the others. But get out there and exercise, build muscle, and that's, you want to talk about old school, new school. One of the great things that I really tie into, and I know I'm kind of an old school guy, but I did incorporate a lot of things, especially with females, is the old adage about, oh, you'll become muscle bound and all these other things.
Surprised
And
we didn't say that
it's the
sooner.
importance, especially for women, of lifting weights, strength training. It's good for preventing osteoporosis,
You
right?
talked about, I don't want to cut you off, but menopause,
Yes.
it helps to fight off some
Yes.
of the issues that come from menopause. Strength training and bone density and building help to combat some of those things.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Yes, and it works in conjunction. Hormone replacement therapy, is not taboo, right? I mean, it just puts women back on track, especially, at those ages, right? And even for men, being very aware of testosterone levels and how damaging that could be, not only to your fitness, but your mental well-being as well. But, just going back to what we were just talking about, right, with fitness and stuff, is people also focus too much on body weight. Right. And, with this whole GLP-1 craze with all these drugs, right? It's about, oh, I want to get down to a certain weight, but at what cost, right? So to me, and, something my nutrition I work on, it's much more important about what your body composition is, right? So what I mean by that is you can be light and thin and have very low muscle and be generally unhealthy, where you can be somewhat heavier in body weight, but your body composition has a healthy amount of muscle, right? And so you could be healthier. I think some of these drugs, and again, some of them have good uses, whether it's for diabetes. I think for very obese people, it's a worthy drug because, how do people get healthier if they're so obese that they can't even move or work out? So I do see like some of those things to get somebody to a level where now they can at least go to the gym, right? Then come off the drug and start to do it a healthier way, because these drugs also, don't forget, you're losing muscle. So you're not only just losing fat, but you're also losing muscle. Right. So what is really the return besides just losing that body weight? So again, everything has its uses. I think it's a little bit abused now, where if somebody's 20 pounds overweight, they want to take the drug so they could get down to a body weight. But, is their overall health better? I would say that's up for debate. But I would say, focus a lot on lifting. Everybody should lift weights, no matter what your age is, no matter what your gender is. It's healthy. Muscle is healthy. That's what the body was made to be. It's made to be muscle. The more muscle you have on your body, and it doesn't mean that you have to be a bodybuilder, but if your composition of muscle is higher, you're generally going to be much healthier. Right, and that's going to stave off a lot of diseases.
Oh yeah.
And all kinds of things that later in life, that's the importance.
Yeah, I could rant on that stuff. I won't go far, but just to give people a little more insight, because I feel like when I get the insight, it gives me this extra motivational boost that I was like, oh, you hear it's good for aging, but like why? Or it's good for. But one of the things is like muscle mass. When you get sick, it's almost like having reserves, right? If you get sick, people that tend to have a higher muscle mass fare better because you have these extra proteins and things that your body can pull from. So even though it'll take from your bicep, for example, if you didn't have any muscle at all, those proteins that you needed to survive or build your immune system or whatever it is, you just don't even have. So people that go into surgeries or people that suffer from some kind of illness, they tend to fare better when they have more muscle mass on their body. Not again, you don't have to be a monster, but meaning that you have good body composition and you have muscle.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I did want to ask you a question, right? And
Yeah.
it's something that I read recently. And what it basically talked about is that depending on your lifestyle, you can pass those genes on to your children.
Oh,
So
yeah,
what I mean
interesting.
by that was, like someone like myself who worked out his whole life, me doing that actually when my children were born, I was able to pass that on, so they have a better start at, in terms of fitness. So
Yeah.
so what I'm passing on to them, whatever's in there, it makes them more likely to be able to be in better shape.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know if you ever heard about it. I did see
I have.
something about that, and
Yeah.
can you tell
I
me
can
more?
touch a little.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on it.
Yep.
But there's like a little bit of my personal philosophy and then also a little bit of some science and stuff. But I think there's definitely something to it. So if you're just considering how evolution works, right? It's like interesting. You look at it and there's a snake that has a certain venom, and then the rat that it was killing or whatever it attacks. What do snakes usually go after? I don't know. Is it rats again? Whatever.
They go after a lot of rodent type,
But whatever,
rodents
some
and
type of
smaller
rodent.
animals.
Then that rodent will come up with the anti-venom for it. Then it'll come up with a new venom. And someone could say, well, yeah, but there's many other things that didn't work before that. But in nature, there's somewhat of this like learning, even if it's random, right?
Yes.
At some point, there's a point when, okay, this worked and it stays, and this didn't work and it didn't. And constantly we're adapting to our environments. And that adaptation is happening immediately at every moment. You're plastic, you're changing. If you lived in the woods, now all of a sudden you live in a city, your mind is going to start to change. Every little bit of you is going to start to adapt. Humans and everything in the world, which goes to my philosophy of movement. Everything is moving. Even the hardest thing in the world that you think, this wall here, you don't think of it as moving. It's just moving so slow that we can't see it on our timeline.
Interesting.
Right? But every single thing is moving. And when everything is moving, that means you are too. So you're always adapting, you're always changing.
Yeah.
So what that then means, though, can that adaptation be passed on to somebody else?
Yeah.
And there has to be something there because, when you're just, again, looking at that evolutionary piece, how does something change over time? It doesn't overnight just, become, for example, we'll take blue eyes or whatever, or like a bigger nose. Like it doesn't just overnight. There was like, wider noses, and
I
then
think
all
I
of
have
a
both
sudden
of those, right? Blue eyes and a bigger nose.
Sorry, I wasn't being observant. I was trying to look in my room and think of something here, right? But it doesn't just all of a sudden come overnight. It's like through generations. It was a slightly bigger nose, then it was a bigger one, then it was a bigger, right? So it's through these generations. But then that has to mean that from one generation to another, even if it was a tiny bit, something was passed in order for this gradual change to happen through one generation to the next.
That's great.
So
I would hope that. It's almost like reprogramming your genetic makeup, right? Or what you're passing on, right? So, the reason why I asked that is it's like you want to think about the benefits of all this stuff, right? It's like not only you're doing it for your own health, right, which makes you a better person, whatever, right? So I think about all the benefits. Well, it makes me a better person, made me in better shape that I can do things with my kids, better mindset, and being an example for them, right? So they can see Dad was always fitness, right? And I always preach to my children the importance of health and fitness, right? It's the only body you get, right? So take care of it. And and lived it by example, right? So that's one way, probably a more obvious way that you can say you pass that on.
Yeah.
Whether it's the discipline and what children observe. Both of my boys are in fantastic shape, both of them, right? They train martial arts, they train in the gym, and so
Joe
I feel like
me now.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I mean, they're my daughter, even though she's probably not as frequent in exercise, you could see her body, right? Like her body responds to exercise. She does swimming now, and you could see the muscles forming on her really quickly. So I think there is something to that. I just wanted to say, I know you're caught up on some of the stuff.
I can definitely say, there's got to be some adaptations and something that's passed from one generation to the next. And I'm sure we'll continue to study this stuff for a long time.
Yep.
And somebody could probably school me a little more on it. But there's got to be something. But even if you don't think about that side, the behavior side, I can definitely speak to, especially in education. Kids don't learn more from what you say. They learn from what you do. So whatever you're doing, they're copying your behaviors. Joe is probably the way he is because of being around you. Even if you never had words and you never spoke to each other, he's just going to copy your behaviors. Human beings are very social. And kids copy their parents way more than they think.
My son Ryan too. I mean, you see him in the gym, like his body is just
I
how it really
Joe,
responded.
Joe twice just because he's messaging me on Instagram talking smack. That's why he's on my mind. But definitely Ryan. I mean, he's been. Last time I saw him, he was like ripping and pulling me on the mat too. And then Jess also. But yeah, they definitely. There's no doubt behavioral wise, That's why they always say it's important to lead by example. And in my podcast, I speak about embodiment, meaning about becoming these things. Because if I tell my kid, be fit, be fit, be fit, and then I'm out of shape.
That's right.
They're not, they are copying your behaviors. So the behavior you set is a role model for your kids, and it's a role model for every person around you, everybody in your family, everybody in your community, everybody in the dojo. And the higher you raise that bar, the more inspiring, sometimes it can be intimidating to some people. So of course there has to be encouragement and lessons that come with it too. But it is important to keep that standard high also because, they usually say you become more like the people you're around.
That's right.
And so the faster you are, the faster I gotta try to keep up with you.
You're right. 100%.
And I talk about family. I say my brother Matt, he's. There was the debate of if he beat me in the race or not. This year, I'm going to, it's going to be tough.
You're going to be hard pressed this year.
Hard pressed. But you better believe I'm going to be training. And I'm not giving it to him easy. But, this is, the better he gets, if I didn't have that motivation, I wouldn't have anything to chase.
That's right.
So now, by somebody in society raising the bar gives me something to chase. You never kind of want to be stagnant. You never arrive. You're always moving. So which direction do you want to move?
100%.
And I want to move up.
Yeah, I mean, so that's great. I mean, I see you as I like to talk to you so much because you respect the past and you're new school, old school. You really kind of embody both the generations. I always say, in a dojo, we used to, your dad and I, how we trained hardcore and beat the crap out of each other and did all this stuff. And you did come up that way, right? Now, you may bring some new stuff to the table, right? But I know that you also lived some of that, respected it, and never lost some of those things, right? So, and one other thing I want to bring up is about discipline, right? So some people may say, I don't have the discipline. And one of the things I always say is probably one of the gifts that I believe that, it was innate to me was discipline. But you could develop discipline.
Absolutely.
And you can refine it. Some people are more naturally inclined maybe to operate in some ways. And some of that could be whether anxiety, when I was younger, if I had anxiety, me having that discipline and order, right, would just help me get through life. Right? So, I would say discipline can certainly be developed. That's definitely a learned behavior, right? Something you can directly pass on to your kids. But that whole genetic thing was interesting. So maybe if you find out more about it, I'd love to chat with you about it. But, we could talk all day, and I think we far exceeded. But this was really an
Yeah.
unbelievable session. I'm glad we finally got to it, and I definitely would love to do more.
Yeah, yeah. I'll finish with that last piece about discipline too, just because I want to make sure people are very aware of, because you made a very good point. But the things that happen in the mind that we can't see, we think that they're more in stone, like we can't change them, and that's not true.
Correct.
Your discipline is very similar to your muscle in the sense of like I can train it, progressively overload it, and get better at it. So yeah, if I'm looking at your discipline and I'm like, oh, I'll never be that. Well, it's just like lifting weights. Like you can't start with, you didn't start lifting whatever it is you lift now. You started much lighter.
Correct.
So even with discipline, start with something small and make sure that you can do it and win, whatever it is. And then from there, you go a little more, a little more, a little more. And a lot of that mind-body is together, right? If it's holding a plank or if it's getting up when my alarm clock first rings. You do not have to keep up with Ryan, right? Because he's a hard one to keep up with, right? Start where you are and progressively overload discipline the same way you would do a muscle. But yeah, today was awesome. Thank you for today. Well anticipated. We'll get another day. Before you go, you got to show everybody your abs.
The abs.
Come on. Well, the check. Come on. Show these guys what this guy looks like under there. Nice stuff.
All right. Well,